Hello and welcome to Worlds Apart. For now, the talk about the need for political transition in Syria has all but obscured any discussion on what form that political transition should take. Is the new Syria going to be more like Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt, or perhaps Libya? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by Ribal Al-Assad, a Syrian democracy activist who also happens to be both a relative and a critic of the sitting Syrian president. Mr. Assad, thank you very much for your time. What a difference 1 year makes, because we spoke to you last year, and back then you called for all parties to come to the negotiating table, but I think you were fairly pessimistic about it happening anytime soon, and yet now it seems that we are fairly close to that mediation. What do you think provided for that willingness of international partners to finally sit down and talk, something that they managed to avoid for all those years?
Yeah, I think it was mainly the Russian intervention which has changed the balance of power on the ground in Syria. The Russians went in with one aim, is to attack, of course, all what they see as terrorist groups in Syria. They're not after a brand name like the coalition is, for example. They're not just after ISIS, they're after Al-Nusra, they're after Ahrar al-Sham. They are after all those who share and believe in this perverted ideology. Yes, please.
I'm sorry for interjecting. Back then, I mean, a year ago when we talked, you were critical of all the parties. You said that they were very slow on arriving at any realistic response to the crisis. Do you think Russians have been too slow to move into Syria?
I mean, yes, of course I believe in it. The Russians and the Americans have been too slow to move into Syria, allowing for regional powers to take the lead. And this is what has led to the disaster we're in today, because as you know, at the start of the uprising, yes, people were chanting for democracy and freedom, which is normal for everywhere. But when we left it for those Gulf countries who were worried about the domino effect that it could bring to their own countries, they don't have any real interest to see a democratic system in Syria. So they started funding all those Islamist extremist groups who share their own perverted ideology, and they wanted to place them in powers because they are something that they could support, they could understand, they could live with. But they certainly did not do genuine democracy, because they would know very well that they would be next.
Do you believe that Russia and the United States are after the genuine democracy in Syria?
I mean, it's not that they are after genuine democracy today, but they are today after, to try to put back Syria together, because it has become a global threat. It has become a danger to their own national security, with those Islamist groups coming from Europe, from America, from Chechnya, from Dagestan, everywhere, joining those Islamist groups such as ISIS, Al-Nusra, and others. And it's said now that a lot of them, thousands of them, have come back under the guise of being refugees to plan new attacks on the West.
Now, I'm sure you know that both Russians and Americans are now talking about bringing all sides to the negotiating table, but I think in reality events of the last couple of months show that at least one major player in the Syrian war theater is sidelined, and this is Turkey, because its ability to maintain supplies for the militant groups is largely curtailed. Its plans for Syria, including the creation of a no-fly zone, I think is more or less buried. How do you think Russia and the United States should engage Turkey constructively to make sure that it does not sabotage the fragile progress that we have achieved so far?
Well, first of all, I've said it previously. I think Turkey today has become, like a heavy member of NATO. It's not, and it should not be kept in NATO, because their policies are extremely, as you've seen, supporting extremist groups such as Al-Nusra, ISIS, many others. And they have tried on several occasions, to bring in NATO, into the conflict, drag NATO into the conflict that's going on there. You've seen with the downing, for sure, of the Russian jet. Before that, if you remember, the chemical attacks that happened previously in Damascus, which they tried to hide the fact that they arrested a few members of Al-Nusra with sarin gas, and they were all released in Turkey. Both the Americans, Western countries, and the Russians have to be much stronger on Turkey. They have to put Turkey back on its, at its place and not allow it to intervene into.
But how exactly do you think that could be done? Because it seems to me that you're overestimating the level of frustration that Western countries have with Turkey. Sure, its act is not very pleasing to many Western leaders, but again, at the same time, it is an important member of NATO. And I have to say that in many Western circles, the dislike of Russia is much stronger than the dislike of Turkey, and perhaps even the dislike of the Islamic State.
No, but they are betting also. As you know, Turkey is the largest force in NATO, the largest army in NATO, the second largest army in NATO, and they don't want to lose that as strategic, alliance. But at the same time, they are betting on at the time where Erdogan is going to leave. As you know, for example, when he was hitting the Kurds in northern Syria, they told him, both the United States and France and other countries, stop attacking the Kurds in northern Syria. On another note, for example, he was warned, for example, lately when they were passing the bill in Congress against the Muslim Brotherhood. Again, you've seen Erdogan going, he was really displeased with that, and he was very harsh with the Americans, and he threatened even the Americans supporting, the Kurds in Syria. So I think bit by bit there is change. They're waiting for Erdogan, which I don't think he will have much longer in office, mainly after, I think, the sanctions, after what's been going on, with ISIS coming back to do attacks in Turkey, with the Kurds attacking.
Ribal, with all due respect, I'm afraid to ask you, but don't you think that you're perhaps committing the same mistake that Americans made 5 years ago when they thought that, Bashar al-Assad has a couple of months left in office? When you say that President Erdogan has, a short time left in office, that is perhaps a bit of a stretch.
No, but there is a big difference between Syria and Turkey. First of all, Syria has been, under dictatorship for 40 years. So it's normal that people in the world want to have, their say. They want to have, to be able to live free, to say what they want. And we have to admit that, first of all, what happened in Syria and all over during the Arab Spring, it was mainly because of economic hardships that's going on, the economic crisis all over the world. So if it touched countries, Western countries such as, Spain, Italy, Greece, and others, of course it's going to touch, countries like Tunisia and Syria, who are much poorer, and a lot of them count on tourism.
But at the same time, I'm sure you know that the Syrian conflict has been primarily framed, at least in the beginning, as a democratic issue, as an issue of human rights. And I want to bring us back to Turkey, because in his recent interview to Al Jazeera, Turkey's Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said that, and I'm quoting him, that Russia controls the skies, but the hearts of the Syrian people are with us. And that's an interesting quote, because 5 years ago, the Turkish model was propounded as a template for the future Syrian democracy. Do you think that the Turkish model still has some genuine appeal among the Syrian people?
No, of course not. And also, Turkey has never been, Turkey under Erdogan has always, and is still wanting to change the democratic Turkey into something more Islamist, something more, as the Muslim Brotherhood do usually. They come into office, they understood that, they cannot, they have to play to the Western gallery today. So we come into office, we bit by bit, we try to control all the system, the same way as it happened in Egypt. But unfortunately, in Egypt, they were too quick to show their real face. If you remember Karadawi saying, for example, let's not cut hands off for the first 5 years. So this shows you that what they really want. They are exactly the same as ISIS.
Erdogan wasn't really making a secret out of it. Everybody knows about his 1990 quote about democracy being like a train, and yet he's been in office for quite some time, and in fact praised as a hope for the Muslim world.
Because of, as you know, the economic situation in Turkey was better than all over the other Muslim or Arabic countries. So most people, as you know, as we say in the West, they vote with their checkbooks. So they were having, good times. They voted for Erdogan. Erdogan promised them a greater Turkey. As you know, this everywhere in each country. They play on the nationalist, sentiments. And it worked, but it could only work for a certain time. And also in Turkey, the opposition is very badly organized and very, very divided. So,
well, and it is hard to express your position in Turkey these days, given the act of the government. Now, we mentioned the Turks. They are also now sided with the Saudis, and in political terms, those are various kinds of political Islam, whatever it means. And by the way, ISIL is also a form of political Islam. I think there have been some public steps on the part of Turkey and Saudi Arabia to distance itself from the Islamic State, but there are also some, I think, efforts to do some political rebranding of al-Nusra affiliated groups and Islamist formations of various kinds. I'm ready to concede that not all Islamists are like ISIL, but I want to ask you, how would you identify those who are genuinely ready, not just for political transition, but for political process, long-term political process, and who do not see democracy as a train that, you know, you would get off once you reach your destination?
Well, Oksana, we have to understand one thing. There is Islam and there is Islamism. Islam is a religion of peace, and Islamism is a perverted ideology. You know, and unfortunately, there's nothing as called moderate Islamist. It doesn't exist. You know, you could tell me ISIS, Al-Nusra, the Muslim Brotherhood, or others. They all follow the same perverted ideology. As you know, the Muslim Brotherhood created Hamas, for example. The Muslim Brotherhood, Abdullah Azzam, who was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, went down to teach Osama bin Laden and to create with him Al-Qaeda. So the Muslim Brotherhood are actually at the root of everything, and this was cited in the bill that just went into, to Congress. But they learned the difference between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafi Wahhabis is that they learned how to change. If you remember the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, in Syria over 30 years ago, they were using the exact same method ISIL and Al-Nusra are using today. Bombings, killing everyone who does not share their perverted ideology. They had even, a motto called ADAS for A for Alawites, D for Druze, and S for Ismailis, which means we have to kill all of those. And they were hanging girls who did not wear the veil. They were bombing schools, you know. So it's exactly the same thing. The only difference is that they learned that they need to play to the Western gallery and, you know, to wear
demonstrate
suits,
their moderate
exactly, to show themselves as moderates or not moderates. But if you look at their flags, they're not actually hiding. One time I met with this former, ambassador, U.S. ambassador, and she told me, but it's, you know, Ribal, I was astonished by your speech because the Muslim Brotherhood, they seem so moderate. They come to see me, they wear suits, they shave their, you know. I'm like, but sorry, ma'am, Miss Ambassador, but you know, those people are not hiding. They are coming to you with their flags. You just refuse to see it. Their flag is very, it shows exactly what they are. You know, they're saying that the Quran is their constitution, jihad is their way, and dying in the name of Allah is the greatest hope. So how is that different from, from Al-Qaeda and ISIS?
Mr. Assad, we have to take a very short break now, but when we come back, several countries in the region have already tried their hand at both political transition and national reconciliation. Can they offer any lessons for Syria? That's coming up in a moment on Worlds Apart. Stay tuned.
Do we speak your language? Want news, programs and documentaries in Spanish? What matters to you? Breaking news, alternative angles, hidden stories. Are you here? Then try RT Spanish. To find out more, visit actualidad.rt.com.
The Deepwater Horizon explosion in 2010 killed 11 people and caused the largest marine oil spill.
There's oil leaking, and we need to stop it. We need to stop it as soon as possible.
Hot oil coming out into a cold ocean, filled with methane. There was no precedent for it.
The efforts to stop the spill were even more catastrophic.
We have been unable to overcome the flow from the well. So we now believe it's time to move on to the next of our options.
How do you feel about the handling of the spill right now?
I think it's the most unorganized mess that I've ever seen in my life.
Daily investigations into the facts show the aftermath.
Oil and chemical dispersant swirling together into a toxic soup.
Oh my God. A recent report by our top scientists found that the majority of oil has now evaporated or dispersed.
The impacts on the ecosystem were much broader than we initially anticipated and realized.
What was supposed to be pretty effective turned out to be
Welcome back to Worlds Apart. We are discussing the future of Syria with Ribal Al-Assad, the founder and the chairman of the Iman Foundation. Mr. Assad, you often describe Syria as a beautiful mosaic of various cultures, but it's hard to deny that the last 5 years have fractured that mosaic in major ways. For now, the focus of the talk is on political transition, whether your cousin Bashar al-Assad stays or goes. But if we'll try to take a broader look, the question of what kind or what form that political transition should take still remains. Do you have any idea, do you have any preference for the organizing principle of the new political system? Do you believe that Syria should remain a presidential republic? Should it be turned into a parliamentary one? What's your general idea?
Yes, to start with, I just want to add one when we called for for the past 5 years, I've been calling for that we should have, the dialogue that's going on today is not going to lead nowhere. Because after 5 years, as you said, of killing, of destruction, and, people, refugees, millions of people, refugees, almost 1 million injured, 500,000 dead, there's a big problem, going on today in Syria. It's not that it's fractured, because, we have to admit, that most, for example, people today who are living internal refugees live under the regime control. So today, when you hear a lot of people talking about, for example, Alawistan or this is not true, because the majority of their internally displaced are not even Alawites. And there are 7 million who live in Latakia, who live in Homs, who live in Damascus, who live all over Syria.
Absolutely, but there is also an increasing number of people, including high-placed American officials, like, for example, Obama's National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, who already are floating the idea of a proportionate governance system, which would presuppose either the partition of Syria or the introduction of sectarianism as an election principle. What do you think about this proposal?
Yes, it's very sad, because I think this is something that is not it's not news. It's something that I think that was that have been thought of from the beginning. Why? Because, as I said, after all those years, you look at what they did at all this Geneva 1, 2, 3 is trying to bring again the same people. On the one side you have the Syrian regime, on the other side you have the Islamist opposition backed by Turkey, Saudi, Qatar, whatever. Do you think the majority of peaceful people who went into the streets at the beginning want to replace a dictatorship with a theocracy? Of course not. So we cannot today, after 5 years, giving them these two choices. If we are after genuine democracy in Syria, if we ever were, we should have called on a conference, bringing together inviting all those people and groups who genuinely believe in our values, democratic values, human rights, freedom. Unfortunately, we have not done this, and who are willing to commit to this. That would have automatically excluded all Islamist groups, because they would certainly not agree on equality of a woman and a man. They would not agree on equality of a Shia Muslim, Sunni Muslim, and Alawites. So why should they come? Why should we even back them?
But I agree with you on a certain point, but it is also not only a matter of who you agree to the negotiating table, but how you structure the political system long term. And again, the Lebanese example, I think, is relatively easy for Americans to relate to, because at least, it is one of the few successful democracies in the region, even though the success of that democracy is highly questioned. And that's my next question to you, because Lebanese system has always been criticized for the fact that it is arresting Lebanese political and democratic development, but at the same time it managed to, put some sort of blockage on the political infighting. When people of Syria think about their future, should they focus on trying to find an immediate temporary solution that will not put the end to the fighting, or should they think about something more long-term, which in the end could be much more difficult to arrive to? It
should, of course, be a long-term solution. And first of all, Lebanon, I don't think it's a good example, because, they haven't been agreeing for the past few months on taking care of their own garbage. It's been covering all the streets. So I don't. But
at least they're not shooting each other on the streets in the same numbers as it is happening in Syria.
Yes, but it could lead to a military confrontation at any time. Today it's not leading to that, because one group is armed. Has a lot more arms than the other group, and that's the only solution why they haven't been at each other's throats at the moment. I think for Syria we have to have, you know, a long-term solution for Syria. It cannot be like Lebanon. It has to be like what Syrians really want. I think they've discussed, the Russians have discussed a federal solution, a confederal solution for Syria. I think it could be you know, a possibility. But we have to make sure that the interest of all Syrian people, you know, will be in this solution. It might take time. It might take time.
Well, it's already been taking 5 years.
Exactly, but because of the stubbornness of the people, they've been saying, for example, the regime has to go. Well, it didn't go. You know, so why did we waste all this time if we could have done things from the beginning? This is what I was calling from the beginning, from the start. We should not, you know, carry arms. I was calling on all the opposition, do not accept to carry arms. Once you carry arms, you're going to lose.
Can I bring, again, the example of Lebanon? And what I think that system demonstrated is that any political blocs in Lebanon are still primarily based on religious, local, or clan affiliations rather than political differences or political similarities, which is very typical of Western parties. Is that something that will have to remain a feature of Middle Eastern politics, that, you know, your religious and kin connections will always take the prevalence to the political views and political procedures?
Unfortunately, there is that in the Arab world, we are very unfortunate with that, is that Arabs are not very nationalist. You know, there is a group, for example, the Ba'ath Party and others, who are nationalists, who try to revive this nationalism in Arabs. But in general, Arabs are more, it's about me, my family, my tribe, my sect, my religion, and my country comes last. This is why you have seen the easy disintegration of, for example, of you know, of what went on, for example, in Iraq, what's going on, you know, in Syria and Lebanon, is that they cannot see that they are all, they have to all be brought together and attached with, you know, that they have to fight for their country.
Mr. Assad, if you really hold that view, I think that the logical conclusion would be, and I think this is also something underappreciated in the West, that the natural implication of what we call political Islam would be that the second part of this phrase, Islam, will always take prevalence over the first part, which is political or policy. And I think we've seen that, as you pointed out, in Egypt. We are perhaps seeing that in Turkey. How can you avoid that in Syria, especially if all the regional players are calling for the so-called Sunni empowerment?
It's not that everyone is calling for it, but the regional power are calling for it, because this is what I said. I go back to the same point, is that they see it as Saudi said, that the fall of Aleppo to the Syrian regime is a threat to their own national security. I mean, how would you understand that? And they called, for example, on an Arabic alliance, you know, to go into Syria or Yemen or whatever. But this is not actually, we all know this is not an Arab alliance. This is a Sunni alliance. They want to mask it, because they don't want to say that this is Sunni. They want to mask it on saying this is an Arab, you know, alliance. But this is not. And this, unfortunately, going on all over the Middle East, because there's a big lack of education. What we are going through the Middle East today, it's what Europe went to a few hundred years ago, when there was, you know, the Christians were fighting Catholic and Protestant, and this is what we're having today. It will need time, you know, to calm down. It will need time for people to understand that religion, you know, should come second, that, you know, we have to all live together.
You say that it's going to take time for people to understand that, but you're calling for political transition now. And I want to mention, just for the sake of balance, that, you know, Sunni businessmen have always been a strong base for the Assad government. They used to make up the majority of the Ba'ath Party. They also are fighting in the Arab Syrian army. So can you really reach that consensus model through the ballot box? Because you may be as critical as you can be about the system that the Assad family set up, but at the end of the day, it is taking into account all those, you know, balances of power between various minority groups and the majority as well.
Yeah, but it's not because of the Assad. First of all, the Ba'ath Party came before the Assads, and the Ba'ath Party was, you know, the notion of, you know, Arab nationalism. And it was kept through the Assad. I mean, the party, one of the things that weakened actually Syria was that the party, I mean, was kind of annulled in the 1980s. So a lot of people stopped seeing themselves as connected to this party, and those who stayed, a lot of them who stayed were more for their own, you know, like their jobs, not losing their jobs for certain interests that they have in the States. And a lot of them still believe, of course, a lot of them still believe in Arabism.
I'm not defending the Ba'ath Party here. What I'm asking you is whether you think this consensus model that they have created can survive the ballot box test. If the Sunnis go to the polls and they are told by everybody around them that you have to, choose your Sunni interests or put your Sunni interests first, then what does it mean for the rest?
There is a huge part that is, in Syria that is very well educated and that will not accept this sectarianism in Syria. Obviously, it's what I said. A lot of them did not choose to leave outside of Syria. They went in to live in Syria, even though they're against the regime, but to live, in the regime-controlled areas. And a lot of them, of course, as you've seen, have the ones who have joined Al-Nusra, ISIS, or other Ahrar al-Sham and others. They still do represent a certain portion of society. You could call them uneducated or whatever, but we do have this kind of, portion of uneducated or, people who are dragged by who have been brainwashed by those sectarian TV channels, who have been brainwashed by those clerics coming out.
And you maintain that those people should take part in the political process nonetheless?
I think no. I think that's very difficult because you can have dialogue with everyone, but how could you sit and have dialogue with someone who thinks of you as an infidel? This is what makes it very difficult. For example, if you're a Christian, how are you going to sit with someone who, deep in his ideology, you've seen videos of him saying that we have to kill Christians, who have killed Christians, who have killed Alawites, who have killed Sunnis who don't believe in their perverted ideology, who have killed Ismailis and Druze. How could you sit with those people? What kind of dialogue am I going to have with them?
Well, that leads me to my, next question. One country that is often mentioned in the same sentence as Syria is Libya, and you no longer have major international disagreement over Libya. Everybody agrees that there is a major need to create a national unity government, but apparently that agreement in and of itself is not enough for the creation of that government. Isn't there a danger that once President Assad steps down, that Syria, instead of a democratic government, will be left with no government at all, no army, and no ability to defend itself against the extremists?
No, I'm sure that he's not going to, he's not going to step down, that's to start with. Second thing is that today, nobody's telling anymore the regime that the regime has to go. Everyone agrees that.
I think the Americans are saying that he doesn't have to go now, but...
yes, because they...
And I'm sure he himself would agree that sometime he will have to step down,
yes,
if you believe in democracy.
But they talk about a person. Today, as you remember, at the start of the uprising, everybody was talking about the regime must go. The regime, the Assad, the Alawites, that was the whole thing in the media. Now they notice that, okay, we came back 90% on our original, but, a lot of countries, you still have to, somebody has to be a scapegoat, I was telling Bashar that at the end of the day, he's going to be the one responsible. Why? Because he's the head of the state, he's the head of the Ba'ath Party, he's the head of the military. He's, even if he's not really responsible, even he doesn't have...
So do you think that in the interest of Syria, he has to step down?
At a certain point, he will have to step down through elections. I do genuinely believe that he has to step down, and we have... It's not by force that we have to take him out. We have to take him out through elections, through the ballot box.
Even though you cannot be sure who will come to replace him.
As long as...
Even if that person could be protective of democratic freedoms.
It's what I said. As long as the Islamist extremists are not part of this future government, as long as they are not part of negotiations, which they are today, then it's possible.
Well, Ribal, I think nobody, given the experience of the region, nobody can guarantee you that. Libya has just demonstrated that perfectly, but unfortunately we have to leave it there.
Sorry, but because we keep on inviting them, we keep on giving them access, we keep on recognizing them, on the international scene. And if we continue on doing that, of course, they might have a chance.
Well, anyway, we have to leave it there. I really appreciate your time. And to our viewers, please share your comments in our Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube pages. And I hope to see you again, same place, same time, here on Worlds Apart.